Good morning. How is everyone? It's a gorgeous day. I'm headed out to the track today, so I am super excited. Get in the mood. All right, let me figure out how to stop my share. Well, maybe I did already. All right, there we go. All right, so this morning we are going to jump into um, we're going to keep going on getting sellers ready for the market. Okay, so the past couple of weeks we've talked about pricing, right? How to pick the right price, how to direct them in the right strategy for pricing, right? To make strategy or to make pricing not a number but a strategy, a marketing strategy that we're going to use. And then today we're going to jump into the other side of that, right? So when we're trying to get people in the market, right, in their market to sell, we have two things. We're going to use our pricing strategy and condition, right? That's the only other thing that we can really do anything about is condition. So if you're at a place where you can open your chat box, go ahead and put in what conversations you need help with around the condition of the property, right? Because sometimes that's hard to tread lightly when you need to tell someone maybe some bad news, something they don't necessarily want to hear, something they might be emotional about, right? And we have to change that. So that's some of the stuff we're going to talk through today. Okay. All right. I don't have many off video, which is perfect. No one stress about that. I just want you to know I'm just going to be talking a lot. So just be ready for that. Okay, so first, I want to start with what is the reason of the condition, right? What is the point we're trying to get across? What is our goal when we're getting a house ready for the market in regards to their condition? What I always told every seller is that we are attempting to create our most confident buyer. Would you guys agree? If we have the most confident buyer walk in our house that feels really confident and good about this house, what will that likely do for us? Right? It makes our house more appealing. It makes them second guess different things, right? So I tell every seller our goal is to get the most confident buyer we can in this property. Okay. So share with me if any of you can in your chat box or yell it out, whatever. What makes a confident buyer? When you are showing properties to a buyer and they're looking at a house, what kind of things do you see in a house that makes them go, oh, this is a good house? Anyone want to throw some of those out there? What makes them say this is a really good house? It's cleaned up, right? So let's think about the first impression when you walk up. Their landscaping is pretty much buttoned up, right? Landscaping's buttoned up. There's not cobwebs around the doors, right? So you got to think about what I always would tell people is we show houses very differently than we live in them. Okay, so we don't expect you to live like this. So what I'm going to do is show you how to make your house now a show home ready for the market. Okay, so think about when you're showing buyers some of the things that make them feel confident about a property, right? The air conditioner. Dust off those fins before you get it ready for the market, right? Because a lot of people are used to that. They've had a house before. They're like, oh, if there's dirty fins, someone's going to say something, right? Think about some of those things that you need to do to get them positioned as this house has been so well maintained. Okay. Here are some of the other little tips and tricks that I would tell sellers. When you go in a closet, and all their shirts are hung by color, right? In the same way. And the dresses are in one spot, and the shirts are in another spot, and the pants are in another spot. That makes you automatically think, wow, this is a really meticulous homeowner. Correct? How many of you have seen that? How many of your buyers walk in and go, oh my God, I can't believe they live like this? Yes, that's what we're going for, right? That is not how they live. I'll put 100% on the fact that that is not how they live, right? And that is what you want the buyers to feel when they walk, when they open the pantries, when they open the fridge, okay? Talk your sellers through that exact feeling and what that feels like, and that's what they're trying to portray. Here's what we want going through those buyers' minds when they open your closet. If they live like this, I guarantee they change their furnace filters probably early. See how that connects? Right? If their closet looks this good, everything I don't see probably looks this good as well. They probably clean their ducts once a year, right? Whether it's true or not, that creates a confident buyer. Yes? Okay. So be prepared to have those conversations with your sellers, and you've got to talk them through those examples of why. It's not enough to just say, hey, and be extra diligent about your closet, hang everything by color. Tell them why they're doing that, right? Then they'll get much more involved in the positioning of this property with you and think of things you haven't. Okay, so number one, creating a confident buyer. Talk them through all the ways throughout this entire process we're going to create a confident buyer. That has to do with price as well, right? The better deal they think they're getting, the more confident they are about this being a great house, right? Think through that mindset with your buyers and explain that to your sellers. Okay, let's talk about to stage or not to stage. What are your rules of thumb in when you recommend someone to bring in a stager or not? Let's talk about professional. So back it up. 3 types. You guys have seen that in the script book and in the listing presentation. I always recommended 3 types of staging. There's either none, your house is ready, we don't need to stage it. 2, we're going to stage with your stuff. That might mean taking things out, right? Moving things around, maybe bringing in some light things like some towels that all match color, some plants, some things like that. Very light staging. Then we'll have professional stagers. Okay, the professional staging, some people, that's their listing process. I think Connie mentioned that last time. There is probably about 10% of the market that recommends a stager every time. Okay, so there is 10% of agents that are doing that already as part of their marketing package. If you don't, do you have a typical rule of thumb for when you recommended staging and when you didn't? Throw that in the chat box or shout it out. I'm going to tell you mine in just a minute. Anyone? Okay. So, my rule of thumb was, if they can't envision how to live in this property without stuff, we likely need to stage. If there is a room that's questionable about what would we do in this room, how would this flow, where would we put the TV, right? If there is, I just had that the other day, right? If you're standing in a room wondering where we put the TV, that truly might be the one thing you stage in that room is the TV, right? Let's take that objection away. Let's make them not try to think about some of those challenges. Okay, so I always thought of staging in that way more than anything. Of course, if it's going to dress it up, now we have digital staging and all that kind of stuff, right? But be ready to just tell the sellers why you recommend what you do. Okay? And mine was always, as we walked through, I would say, okay, how do you envision this room? How do you think they should envision this room? And then let's do that. Okay. And then depersonalizing. Let's talk through that. So I always told everyone, no matter what, before I walk in, this was on the pre-qual, I'm pretty much going to tell you that 30% of your stuff needs to just get out of there. So anything you're not using every day to cook with, bathe with, live with, put it in a box. Okay, so that's how you want your house to look before you start listing it. That's twofold. Number one, it reduces the amount of stuff that we have to work around, that you have to pick up, that you have to deal with. Number two, you're going to hate me when I tell you to put 10 years of your life in a box in 30 days, in 14 days, right? So let's do a third of it now. And then when you're doing 2/3 later, I promise you're going to thank me for it. Okay. So that's how I tell them to get rid of everything. If they can even start working on that before I get over, that's ideal, because then I can get an idea of what they think needs to stay and what I think needs to stay. Okay. Here are some of my other tips and tricks for that. In the kitchen, I want one cabinet empty at all times. When they pack everything up and reorganize the kitchen, I want one cabinet empty at all times. Okay, that is to shove before a showing, before the inspection, before whatever, right? That's where everything can just get dumped and shoved if you need it. So you'll accumulate through this whole thing stuff you need for the new house, everything else, make a staging area, make a shoving area. Okay. Also, if they have littles, you need empty toy boxes. Okay, so when they're ready for the market, the toys they don't play with are gone and the empty toy box is there ready. They might have a full toy box, right? But the empty toy box is for the dump and go, right? They get ready for a showing in 5 minutes. I have to pull everything out of this room, the blankets, the homework, everything, and I'm going to dump it into one nice little toy box that looks like it's supposed to be there. Okay, so all of this goes into staging a house to get it ready, right? Staging a house to get it ready. Let's talk about depersonalizing. One of the things I hear a lot of agents and I hear a lot of consumers, the biggest thing the consumer thinks when they hear depersonalize is I have to take down all my personal pictures, right? That's the one they know about. They think about that one. That one isn't even as important as the one I'm going to talk about next, which is their specific decorating theme. Okay. So I use apples as one of mine. Early in my career, I had a homeowner who absolutely, I mean, just loved apples. It looked darling. And the majority of the market does not like apples, right? So I had to tell her, this is your theme and it is a gorgeous theme. However, since every buyer has a different one, we want them to be able to come in and envision their theme in this place. So therefore, we're going to depersonalize yours. Okay. So that's how I talk them through that because we know we all have those houses and it's like, it is gorgeous. It is put together to the nine and it's not likely what the market will take, right? They have a theme or a style that might not accept the majority of the market. Okay. Have you run into that? Hopefully. So that's another one. Be prepared for how you're going to have that conversation with them, right? How important it is to stage, how important it is to do all this condition work up front, right? And how important it is to make it not feel like yours. Okay. I might have said that in the beginning, but the number one goal for a seller is that when it doesn't feel like you live there, probably means you're ready for the market. Okay, because again, where we started, we do not live in houses the way we show them. So if it still feels like you're living in it, right, we probably haven't gone far enough. We need to make it ready, ready, ready. Okay, and again, this is really in any market. Okay, because I think creating a confident buyer gets you more money in every market you're selling in, right? So you have to be cognizant of what does matter right now. In a fast market, you may not have to paint all the trim and touch it up perfectly. And if you do, it might create a completely more confident buyer and get you a much higher offer. Okay, so that's kind of where you're thinking of these things as you're talking them through with them to get them ready. Okay, let's see. What else? Oh, kitchen, take things off the counters, all that kind of stuff. You guys probably do that. That goes with the third out, right? Getting them to just reduce and get it ready for the market. Okay. Now let's talk feedback, right? So once we're on the market, feedback is going to be our next eye into condition. Okay, sorry. And before we go to feedback, let's back up one more time. Okay. If your sellers are having difficulty understanding how their house is so different from the market, there have been times I needed to walk them through competition. Okay. You guys have probably known those sellers too, that you're like, hey, if they saw a couple houses that are listed and how they're presented, right? I should probably have them see them. Preview them first. Never take them to a house you haven't walked through before. I've done that and it was worse. Did not help our case. Preview the house first, make sure it shows how you want them to see it, and then take your seller and walk them through a competing listing and have them truly compare theirs to another property. Okay?
I
Yes.
feel like Julie, maybe, I don't know if anybody needs this or not, but making these recommendations, like the clarity, confidence, and control inside that appointment that you're having with them, they're going to push
Mm-hmm.
back. Some of them are
Yeah.
going to push back, right?
Hmm.
So how do you overcome that if they're giving you resistance about how we're going to stage the home and attract
Great.
the most confident buyer? I mean, I feel like that's kind of a missing component. We can
Yeah,
all
I
have
love
these
it.
conversations,
Let's
but if
role
the
play
air
it.
goes out of the room, it's like I'm not going to take down my, my 12-foot Jesus. I'm just not going to do
Yeah,
that. So
right.
anyhow, just a thought.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so anytime you're getting pushback, I'm going to take you to the handling objections, right? And this is the same. So you have got to ask questions to isolate the objection. What are they truly objecting to? Okay. So let's think of, I don't want to go down yeah, that route, but let's go down the apples. Let's take the apples. Okay. So they love their apples. I'm not taking down my apples. I've worked so hard. I've invested so much money into this property, right? And I just think it's really important. That might be a reason. Um, and I would ask questions, right? So, do you think if the next buyer comes in and can't see their theme in here, it could cost you money? No, I don't think so. I think this is great. I think it's going to sell it. Okay. And when their purple couch comes in, will it match with all your red apple stuff? Right? You've got to send them the completely opposite direction, right? Because they're thinking, well, everyone comes in with a tan couch and it matches just like mine does. No, we're talking about their style now. Their style could be all sorts of things that we don't even know what it is, right? So our job is to neutralize it enough so their stuff feels comfortable here. Okay. Are you willing to do that? Right. So, and maybe they're still like, no, no, no. Right. So typically when you start asking the questions of what their goal is, okay, people usually there's always a reason, right? There's always a reason they don't want to get there, acknowledge it. You have to compliment them on how amazing it is what they have there is and why someone else's just as amazing just might not match up. And that could cause questions in buyers' eyes. Okay, so ask the questions to truly understand what they're objecting to. The reason I didn't want to go down that other path, Debbie, is because I'm afraid there could be some sort of fair housing thing, right? We hear this all the time. I just heard it recently, and this is not fair housing, but someone said, and if that name comes across a purchase agreement, it will be an absolute no immediately. Right? Guys, people do that. They don't want their next door neighbor buying their house. There is a beef sometimes, right? And that is fair. And that is how some sellers think. And it is our job to help them overcome that, right? And in that instance, what I would encourage them is, right? Unfortunately, we're not supposed to discriminate against anyone. If they have the money and the ability to purchase, would you prefer I just remove the names from every purchase agreement you get so you don't even have to worry about that? Okay, that's where I would try to go with that. If they were adamant about no, 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 right, then I would talk to a manager and see if I can even do it, right? What are we dealing with here? And potentially not take the listing. So I am going to say, and this is a hard one for everyone, but all of these will come around. If they push too much, they're probably not my client. They aren't fitting into my model of how I sell. This is how I get houses sold, right? If it's not what you want to do, there are 9,000 other agents that are probably more than happy to do what you'd like to do to get this house sold. This is just in all my years and experience, this is how I succeed with selling houses. And I find it's better to, right, depersonalize as much as we can, let them see their stuff in here, any color they're bringing in and that kind of stuff. Did that help a little, Debbie? That was a great question. And I want to make sure we're role playing these.
I asked that question for the benefit of the group.
I know. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So you've got to be ready to ask questions because 9 times out of 10, what they're objecting to does not make sense in their head. Okay. They think it, but when you start talking them through, right? What if that person gave 20,000 more dollars than what your list price is? Is $20,000 worth it to let them live here? You're gone. You're leaving. right? And then they'll say, yeah, probably. All right, then, let's do what we can to get rid of that,
I mean, they're going to sell their house anyhow, so they might as well start packing.
right? That's exactly. Emotionally, right? You aren't going to live here. You do not need to worry about the next buyer at all. And your neighbors are going to turn over too. So, right? Everybody's worried about protecting their neighbors from bad people, and you just can't. You just can't. Great question. Okay, what else? Where else do people tend to push back on you when you're trying to have these conversations about staging? Let's talk about, throw them in the chat box if you have them. Here's another one. Let's talk about if they put money into it or not. Okay, so that's another thing, right? You've got a property that if they did take the money to paint all the trim in the house, it probably would allow them to list for more, right? So you have to be able to walk those lines with them and be able to say, for $10,000 less, we could probably list it as is. Or if you spent $8,000 to paint and everything else, we can probably list it $8,000 higher or 10. Now, even trade off, totally up to you. What that might do though is get us a more confident buyer that doesn't walk in thinking I have to walk in and paint the trim in the walls, right? The other thing it will do, so it eliminates a to do thing off their list. The other thing it will do is make them potentially offer us more money because it's eliminating any questions and to dos and things like that from them. So, what do you prefer? Right? They can absolutely say, I don't want to put any of that money in, and that's fine. And your price has to reflect that because you have to know when a buyer walks in, they're going to see this to do list. And how much does a buyer's to do list cost versus a seller's to do list? If the buyer walks in and sees the paint and the trim on the main level being needing painted and it's actually $8,000, how much do they think it is? $24,000. Okay. It's always 3 times more than what it actually costs to get things done. Their brain builds in fear bubbles, right? And that's okay, but you have to explain that to your seller, right? This is why we're better to do this and eliminate this or price it right. Because even if we don't do it, what we know is an $8,000 fix, they're likely going to think is a $24,000 fix. And we're just back to negotiating again and trying to create two really confident clients on each side. Okay, good examples. Okay, so let me think. You guys throw things out. I'm trying to think of anything else we might be missing on this. Feedback. That's where we were going. Okay, so jump to feedback. So once we're on the market, showings are going to tell us, the number of showings is going to tell us if our condition's okay, right? There are 2 reasons they're going to reject us when they see it on paper and not choose to come in. It's either because they're not justifying the value they're seeing on paper for the price we have it at, or there are things they're seeing in the picture that are creating condition questions for them. Okay, so number 1, we're going to get showings. Number 2 reason we're going to know that our condition is okay for this market is we're going to get offers. The market numbers say that after 7 showings, we should have an offer in our hand. We should be getting really good feedback after our 3rd showing, knowing that someone's about to write an offer, and then we should watch it come in through the next 3 to 4 offers. If that doesn't happen, we know there is probably an issue with either our price or condition, and we're going to start digging into those things. Okay? Feedback is going to be how we identify then how we're doing now that we're on the market. Okay, I see a lot of agents make mistakes in feedback, okay, because you don't want to take it personally, right? So sometimes what they're saying, you're like, oh, maybe if I would have had a different conversation with my seller, we would have overcome that, right? So if they say, oh, it's just not matching their style, right? Unfortunately, it's decorated great. They just can't envision themselves there. They see a lot they'd have to do to depersonalize it, right? You're going to start hearing some of those things. Okay. So number 1, here's the mistakes that are made on feedback. Excusing it away. Okay, how many times do you soften feedback? Don't do that. They need to hear it directly from the horse's mouth. Okay, and that is a protecting emotions conversation that you have to have with them before they get their first feedback. Here's what's going to happen. When you get feedback, you're going to take it personally. Okay, because if they're not writing an offer, they have to tell you something they didn't like about it, and that's the only way we're going to know how we're doing in this market. So it is going to hurt your feelings. They're going to reject your house for whatever reason, whether it's something we can do something about or not. So be ready for that. And just remember, it only takes one. So we need all these people. This says 7 showings to get an offer. That means 6 people potentially are either going to bid it up and fight against each other or are going to reject your house. So just be ready for that. Okay. 6 people are not going to buy it, maybe. Okay, so you got to prepare them for that. So number 1, don't excuse the feedback away. Don't soften it. Let them hear it directly from the horse's mouth and make sure they know you hear it the same time they hear it. Okay, they hear it, you hear it. Exact same times. And you will take time after you get it to digest it, interpret it, ask questions, and then we'll be happy to summarize everything you learned for them on their weekly emails. Okay, so don't soften feedback. The second thing is not realizing price, okay? But no one's saying price. How many of you have heard yourself saying that? We're getting lots of feedback, but no one's saying it's overpriced. If they're not writing an offer, that's exactly what they're saying, okay? And you have to tell your sellers that immediately. Whether they're saying it's price or not, that's what they mean. Here's why. Because if they come through and say your floor plan didn't work for what we're looking for, what that tells me is that and everything else we saw at the same price had a different floor plan that does work, which is why we pointed yours out for this property. Does that make sense? Let's try a couple other ones. Nobody said anything about price, but they said the yard was too small. Okay, so what they're saying is that in this exact same price point, we're finding larger yards. Yours is only too small for what we're seeing in the market, right? So you have to make sure you're priced accordingly. Now, if you can say that and then you're like, and we're priced with the smaller yards, right? We should be okay. That objection will go away. Okay, so you will no longer hear your yard is small when you get it priced right, and it's not small compared to everything else they're seeing. Okay, so remember that feedback is often compared to the market, not just necessarily compared to what I want. Okay, so you have to make sure you're reading it that way. There are some things that, yeah, we're not going to do anything about that. That's that buyer, that's specific to that buyer. However, if you're hearing it as a pattern, right, and pay attention to it. That could be something that's happening in the market right now that we weren't aware of, that they keep bringing it up in feedback, and we may need to adjust our price because of it, okay, because they're objections of some sort, okay? So make sure you're always hearing price. That's exactly what they're saying in the feedback is, if your house was priced at a different price, we would be writing an offer, okay? Exactly also why when they didn't write an offer, my next question back to every single one of them was, what price would we have needed to be at for your buyer to consider writing an offer? They will tell you. Okay, now, the good ones will tell you. If they didn't provide feedback, they're not going to tell you, right? But if they provided feedback and are doing their job, they're going to tell you those questions. And that is all understanding your market and what the buyers are thinking out there right now. Okay? All right, what questions before we hop off? Okay, if you guys run into any objections this week or handling any of that kind of stuff and need to talk through it, send me a message and we'll talk about that next week. And then if you have any spring scripts that are coming up that are starting to get you going, right? We're starting to get busy again. So your scripts, you need them more and more and more. Got to have them right there in your pocket. So be practicing, get your role play partners. And if there's any scripts you need to work through, let me know and we'll do it on these calls. All right. I'll see everybody next week. Bye.